Welcome to the podcast of the impossible. I'm Peter Wood, and my two guests today and I have seen and discussed and performed a bunch of magic together. And on this podcast, we're going to talk about it. It's Joel DeWyer and Willard. All righty. Hello.
Actually,
having deja vu. Have we
We're
been
again.
here before?
Yeah, I think we've kicked off an episode.
Yeah, we've done this before.
Discussed this. And it feels good. It's like comfortable, you know.
Yeah.
Learning how to where the
I do miss the banter. Like, you know, since the virtual shows that we did during COVID, and we shut down sort of the in-person shows when COVID hit. I missed it. Like this has always been. It was one of the things I always looked forward to a lot when we performed our shows those weekends, was like getting there early, doing our thing, and then the debriefs afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, the show was the show, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there were some unique moments based on the audience every night, but like by,
Sure.
by and large, it was always our banter.
Oh,
Well, and you know, the other thing that was good, I mean, we were, I love Michael Goudot, comedian juggler, has this great quote about people who want to be in show business are the kind of people who watch the movie Groundhog Day and say, that looks like fun. And it's so true. The idea that I have this 45 minutes of time that I'm going to get to spend with people. And so I can really polish and get into the minutia of little bits and things here and there. And the fact that we were doing basically the same show over and over again with, you know, sometimes we'd be putting in new material or swapping stuff out, but in a lot of cases, what we would be talking about in our both pre and post show chats was just, here's a little tweak I'm going to make tonight. Let's see how it.
Well, and the appeal of that was always, you know, experiencing that little tweak making an actual difference in the show, like from the audience's experience, the fluidity of the effect itself. Like, it wasn't just making those small changes; it was actually seeing the difference it made to the overall performance.
Right,
that was always fun.
Well, and it's great for me too. Like, it is harder for me to see that when I'm doing the show solo.
Sure,
you know, because maybe I film it, but even then, there might not be. I'm coming to it with my own sort of here's where I was in my head at the time. And so it's always helpful when one or both of you guys are able to see a performance and then give your, like, either I thought something went well and you disagree or more often than not, honestly, it's that, like, you know, we as the performer always feel like, oh, that could have gone better. But then, you know, when we're watching our friend, we're like, no, that was, you
know who I think about though, on that point?
Yeah.
Henry Ford.
Ah, okay. Well, that's we're all
Henry Ford.
So let me set the stage, and then Peter can tell you his version of the truth.
We could, yeah, sure, yeah.
So there were several ongoing debates in our show, things that we were always debating whether to tweak this way or that way.
Yeah.
And Peter, being fond of, I don't know, shall we call it highbrow humor? I don't know, like very intellectual,
affluent.
Yeah, for our very affluent audiences. Had a joke. It was the light bulb effect, right? The one you did on Penn and Teller.
Yep.
And it was a comparison between like saying Henry Ford invented the automobile.
Yeah.
And never, ever did anyone laugh at it.
Right.
Because
I did.
You could see in their faces maybe sometimes that they felt there was like a punchline in there. There was a joke but they weren't sure if they were supposed to laugh. And I would always advocate, cut that. It's
cut
stupid.
that. Yeah.
And Peter's like, no, I think it's good. And it was always an ongoing.
And I always said, keep it.
Yeah, you did. You always said it with Peter.
I love it. It's just a moment. And for those who get it, get it. And
why did you love it? Why did you love it? And why did we have to keep it in? And why did I have to painfully listen to it show after show?
I would like to point out that you were not alone in disagreeing, in thinking that it should be cut. If you watch my appearance on Fool Us, there is no mention of Henry Ford.
It was cut.
It was not.
Wait, did you cut it or did they cut it in the edit?
I cut it because I found a better joke. But let's back up. So
any joke would be good. Non-joke would be good.
Any joke.
Just cough.
Finally, you led him to a better joke. He finally.
So yeah.
Thank you. I do take full credit.
Can I tell you the irony? It was actually Willard. Willard's line is what replaced the Henry Ford joke.
Which is what?
These two light bulbs are an Edison and a globe, named obviously after Thomas Edison and the Harlem Globetrotters.
That's a good one.
That is funny. That was
funny
Willard's
line.
line, right?
Funny line.
Here's why I don't like it. So the original line was, I'm talking about every different type of light bulb.
Right.
And I would say, this one is an Edison, which is named after Thomas Edison, who I would say invented the light bulb, but that's like saying Henry Ford invented the automobile, and I don't want to get into it tonight.
But you did.
And that, well, no, that was, yeah.
Just throwing it out there.
So as a fan of Nikola Tesla, I have to hate Edison, right? And the reason that Edison was the Houdini of his time, where he was not necessarily the best and brightest inventor, but he's the one that we talk about now in a lot of,
because he was a shameless self-promoter.
well, and he was a good businessman,
Yes.
and he also the irony is his quote about I failed 1,000 times of making the light bulb, but then I found one that works. Is Tesla just laughed at that, and he's like, well, why weren't you just smarter? Like why did you have to fail? And literally, like the way Edison was more of an iterator than an inventor. He would see a problem that should be solved commercially, and then he would either himself or later he would just have like a factory of people who were all trying a whole bunch of different things. Like it's kind of just, you're throwing at the wall and we're going to see what sticks, which is fine, and did a lot of good things for the country, blah, blah, blah. But, it always bothers me. Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb. Thomas Edison made a light bulb that was able to be mass produced. And so Thomas Edison made the most popular light bulb, and it took off, and Henry Ford did not make the first automobile, right? But he made the one that was able to be mass produced, and it took off. But I realize that the person to get that joke
Is not at our show.
you have to know both pieces of information, and that's the problem.
Yes.
I'm getting into some Dennis Miller territory here.
The moral of this story is jokes born out of arrogance and hatred are not funny.
I guess I get, well, and so I know that, and also, Matt Donnelly is Will has said before that a reference is not a joke. And I think about that a lot, where a lot of times, like, someone will get credit for a laugh, and that wasn't really a joke. You were just sort of referencing a thing that has happened recently.
So does that mean you shouldn't do it?
It depends. As I think, I mean, part of it is semantics, like what you're going to label, label it as. But I think also what's important is that a reference is less likely to be, it's less likely to land with as wide of an audience, because in order for a reference to be appreciated, you have to know what the reference is referring to, right? Whereas when I'm doing the finger chopper thing, right? And so,
great trick, great
and
routine.
I'm all of the what I would call jokes are all situational, and pretty much every punchline, the audience has been given that information in the context of the routine, right? It's not that you have to understand some, political or literary or whatever reference, So, but the reason that we kept wrestling with that line, I don't even want to call it a joke, because it's not a joke. It's definitely a reference, and it's snark. And it's the kind of thing that the collector of the impossible would be grumpy about.
It's
Right.
true. That is true.
And that was always my argument. And
Right.
Yeah.
those who understand that, understand it. And those who get the joke or the reference aren't ones to laugh out loud anyway.
Right.
They're going to,
And I think
because they're going to have a strong opinion.
Sure.
They're going to either agree with you or disagree with you.
Yeah.
And then,
And I think that most people who know that Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb also know that Henry Ford didn't invent the automobile. I don't think it's quite like Dennis Miller famously would take like two very different, like he would make a reference that where you had to know both about ancient Greek and the latest pop song, and in this, and so therefore alienating everyone, So like, I think there was a decent Venn diagram there. But honestly, my problem with the line was always, how do I deliver it? Because there is definitely a way that you can deliver a line to let the audience know that that was a joke, and here's where you're supposed to laugh. And that is one of my big pet peeves with both, magicians and comedians who are not very good, but have learned that if you sort of end with a ta-da, then the audience will clap. And I've often wondered, like, how much could I get away with if I do a card trick and nobody ever sees the card at all, and then except a person, and then at the end I'm like, and it's the 8 of spades, give him a big round of applause. I bet you that person would just be like, oh, okay, that was weird, that wasn't my card, but I guess I'm gonna go sit down now. And I could just completely steamroll, like I could create magic out of nothing, just from telling people now's the time to clap. So that was always my hesitation with that line of like, how do I deliver it in a way that
To the trash.
Yeah.
That's how you deliver it.
Remove
Because
it from the
it was
script, I would
trash.
say.
which is
Garbage
ultimately-
comes to
yeah, that's where it got to, right?
The funniest part of that joke is that you kept doing it, and we kept debating it every debrief.
So it's not in your live show.
It's not.
Even
Do you
now.
ever accidentally though, like, confuse your scripting and go back and just insert it?
No, actually that doesn't.
Because you had it for a long time.
Yeah, that doesn't happen to me with the light bulbs. That does. I've a lot of the changes that I made to the X-ray painting routine to get it onto TV. I wasn't a huge fan of in a lot of cases because it was just a brevity thing. And I'm if I have more time to make it happen, then I will. But with the light bulbs, I do think that it is a better joke. Saying
Globetrotters are still in.
Yes, Globetrotters are still in. And I'll say my only hesitation with the Globetrotters is that I have a general rule that everything in the collector's world has to be at least a century old, right? And that is my only hesitation with that joke now. But the way I'm like, at the same time, I don't take it to an extreme where, like, if somebody holds up their iPhone, I don't say, what is this strange device that you hold in? Like, I'm not going to go all Renaissance Festival, Colonial Williamsburg on people. I will. So the point is, the stuff in my show is old, but I am still present in the current world.
Sure.
And so it's okay for me to know who the Globetrotters are. And so it's okay for me to
The stuff in your show
You're
is
not necessarily from
historical, not
Right.
old.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. And again, like the way that I'm dressing, I want it to be. It could have been from 100 years ago, but it's also not. Again, like if I walk into a convenience store after the show, I don't look like I just got out of a Renaissance festival.
Well,
Depends.
so Willard actually can Willard claim television writing credits now?
I think so. I think that's
Add that to my
Update that LinkedIn.
yeah right.
And then Brian Curry gave me the tag on it, which is "Don't look that last part up." Like that was his, side.
He's so good.
He's
so good.
Oh, he is great.
No, I love writing stuff with Brian. And for our listener here, if you haven't, we've done Brian has been on this program multiple times. So go back and take a listen to some of the Brian Curry episodes are fantastic. And
we spend a lot of time talking about all this stuff, but Curry lives it. Like he really takes this seriously, scripting and jokes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well,
I thought I did until I met him and realized, well, even he's a little bit more than me.
Well, and Brian will even tell you, and I think this is a little bit of false modesty, but also just sort of where his heart is, that like he doesn't feel like he's funny in the moment. He's funny when he's at a keyboard and is able to sort of again that sort of iteration. And I have evidence to the contrary, but like in general, what he does feel like that he's best at is when you do have a script and you're going through and here are a few different lines that I'm thinking about using here, and then you sort of can try them out, and I've always been less of that for whatever reason. I feel more comfortable having it happen organically, and my scripting comes from little tweaks here and there as once I've gotten the basic idea out in front of an audience, but I don't want to rehash. We've all talked about scripting on this program separately as well, but I do think it's sort of, I think people enjoy a little bit of that inside baseball kind of,
So do you think at the Museum of the Impossible, Peter, do you think you will have some little jokes like that, sort of understated jokes and references to
I'll be,
some of your snark?
You mean, are you talking more in like exhibit display type things, or
maybe there's a light bulb display where you make fun of.
Yeah, I could see a little bit of that angst coming through, and again, like I want to have the museum project will continue that aesthetic of 100 years ago. So it has to be something that could have existed 100 years ago. Even if I'm employing, certainly behind the scenes, I'm happy to use whatever the latest technology is. But even something, so like one of the things that I haven't really talked to you guys about, but is something I'm contemplating for the museum. The best term I've come up with so far is an electromechanical buffer, which could be a little bit shorter, I think, of a term. But basically the idea that I've been cautioned by my friends who work in museums that anything that the general public is able to get their hands on will get destroyed. And so how do you make something interactive that also allows for that to happen? So one of the ideas that I have is, let me do a really simple example. I have an impossible object on a turntable, right? And I want a person to be able to rotate that turntable so they can look at the object from all sides, right? What I'm thinking about doing is having at the front of the exhibit some sort of a knob or a lever or something. And then inside the turntable is actually on a motor. And so this knob will control the motor. It would be very easy for me to have a pulley, right? And a crank, and there's no electronic parts required. However, when I get a really overzealous 10-year-old in there who cranks it as fast as they can because they just think that would be fun, now my impossible object is taking off into space, right? So the idea of the electromechanical buffer is that, like, even if it's something that's simply mechanical, by having some electronics in there, they can crank the knob as much as they want and as fast as they want, but that motor will only turn as fast as I have programmed it to turn.
Actually, maybe you mix the two. Maybe they do turn with the the lever. They rotate it like this, and there's the cord or the whatever pulley system. But that's not really doing anything. All that's doing is activating the motor.
Well, yeah, and I think, and also, like, one of the ideas, I don't want it to look like an arcade game. This is what you think of it, is that, it still need, like, thankfully 100 years ago, we had switches, we had motors, we did not have bright yellow push buttons like on Pac-Man. So part of the challenge for me is going to be to sort of, find or maybe even build, some cool, whether it's a lever or whether it's a knob or whatever. I want it to be nice and tactile. But the other thing that's great is then, like, that belt, if there is no belt, then there's no belt to break. And if the thing that the person is interacting with is a semi-disposable, like, okay, that's a knob. I design it in such a way where literally, like, I buy a knob and I plug the knob into the main whatever, but knowing that knob is going to get destroyed, So that's something else that I'm sort of, again, I don't want to bring too much technology into it, but at the same time, I think a situation like that will help me to protect some of the stuff and to keep it as interactive as possible.
So would you say that you are or are not wanting to differentiate yourself from, like, a science museum?
Well, so I guess
more oddities and curiosities, or is it more science, or is it a blend? What are you thinking?
I guess I would like, the joke has always been in the show, like, I really should call myself the collector of the improbable, because in a lot of
also
cases,
funny.
We've talked about that.
I've already bought the .com. No, because, if you look at something like, I mean, using the easy two examples of the light bulbs or the X-ray painting thing, the odds of that being just random are 1 out of 24 in the case of the painting, right? But, like, actually something that, like, I want it to be impossible. I want you to be able to see that whatever that is impossible, not just unlikely. So that is going to be sort of the guiding, in order to differentiate myself from a Ripley's Believe It or Not. Again, a lot of times at a Ripley's, it's just like, wow, I can't believe that thing exists, but here it is, So like the classic two-headed farm animal, that is not, I'm not saying that I would turn one down if one showed up in a packing crate. I would put it on display. But I'm not, that's not going to be the sort of thing that I'm interested in, because it's not interactive, right? You probably, hopefully not.
It could be.
I'd rather not.
Is it taxidermied or is it live?
Johnny Fox in his Freakatorium in New York had a two-headed turtle, like a live walking around two-headed turtle. That's pretty cool. Like I would, that's the sort of thing that
I know a lot of people who are two-faced. Does that interest you?
No, I don't want them coming to my museum. Yeah. So I think that there will certainly be some times where there is a scientific method or explanation behind something. Here's another example of an exhibit idea that you guys might have seen. It's based on a magic kind of a thing. 3 blocks stacked on top of each other. And you pick up all 3 blocks and you can sort of feel like what the weight is of them. And then in the magic routine, maybe you say, okay, I'm going to suck a lot of your strength away. And so now I just imagine you're getting weaker and weaker. Now just pick up just 1 block and see how hard and when you pick up that 1 block, it feels incredibly heavy, right? And you set it down off to the side and then, okay, now let's go the other way. I want you to imagine that you're getting, super, super strong and you've got so much strength. Go ahead and pick up the next block. And then you grab that next block and you don't you pick it up so fast because you've got so much strength. I think that'd be a cool thing to have somewhere and sort of, and guiding people through. The other thing I like about that, I'm trying to think.
That's sort of magic-y. The idea you have that I think would be interesting is if the sum of 3 things was actually weighed less than the individual components.
Oh, sure.
Like as opposed to sapping someone's strength, which is, sort of an effect that's been done before. Like if you pick up all 3, they weigh this. And when you pick up just 1, it weighs more mysteriously. Because that is sort of impossible by, basic.
I don't know how to do that, but sure.
Well, you'll figure it out.
Okay. Right. No, I mean, what the other thing that I like about that is that I do want to be careful. I'm trying to think in terms of inclusivity. I want to make sure that there is a blend of visual impossibilities and auditory impossibilities and tactile impossibilities. So that somebody who, depending on whatever your abilities are, I still want you to be able to get something out of the thing that I'm trying to put together. It's way too easy to just have everything be visual, So I am trying to come up with and I am, working on ideas that will be either auditory, whether you put on a pair of headphones or there's a speaker involved, or again, anything that can be handled by the people, But it also, I want to differentiate it from the Museum of Illusions. I want to differentiate it from a science museum, and I want to differentiate it from a children's museum. And hopefully with the latter point, I would love for it to be just a little bit creepy. Like you guys know I love the Haunted Mansion.
Right.
And one of the things I love about the Haunted Mansion is that nothing actually jumps out at you, but that anticipation that something might. You see this big foreboding building, and then when you go in there, it's just sort of eerie and creepy, and there are some very dark, literally dark, like not graphically dark, but like you get plunged into darkness moments that you wouldn't expect in a Disney theme park, and so I guess I kind of, I don't want it to be a place where I don't want, the sort of classic magician magic show kind of a thing. Again, I keep talking about Harry Potter, but that sort of whole Diagon Alley, idea where there's a bunch of interesting props floated around, but like you kind of like everything seems to be okay, but something sinister might happen here occasionally. And I kind of think that will help to keep it from being like a kid show thing,
Museum of the Impossible and Murder.
And murder.
That's that is the thing.
And
wasn't that was a running joke for us for a while, wasn't it?
So
we can murder makes everything better.
murder makes everything better.
And you know what? Murder has made this episode of the podcast better because we have to wrap it up.
Oh, we're out of time.
We're out of time.
But if people wanted to follow or be involved in the museum project, how would they do? But short of committing murder.
Sure. Yeah. No, please don't do that. Not yet. We'll see. We may have some need for murder at some point down the road, but for now, we are just crowdfunding it. So museumoftheimpossible.com. You can sign up.
Can I get one of those shirts there?
I'm going to work on. There might be some. I'm sure there's merchandise in the pipeline.
All right.
So we'll see what people are interested in.
And a mug.
Yeah. We got to get
You just want all the tchotchkes.
all the cafe press. I want a mouse pad. I want license plate frame. But yeah, so museumoftheimpossible.com. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. Maybe you'll have the only one, yeah, so be a Patreon over there. Not only do you get episodes like this podcast a week early, but also
even before
behind the scenes
regular people hear it.
Yep. You'll be the first to hear all these crazy stories, and when one of us gets in trouble for murder, you will have known about it a week in advance. Like
even before the newspaper.
Yeah, that's exciting. But thank you both for coming here and hanging out this fun. This little confession. And so for my public shows and social media and the Museum Impossible and all that stuff, you can head on over to oftheimpossible.com. Thank you all so much for spending time with me. That's Willard.
I'm in the middle.
See ya.